Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Mocha's application team, and this is our last Design Shop Talk for June, I guess the 1st of July. And we won't have one next week, but we'll be back the week after that. I'm going to be out of town, and we're taking the holiday week for next week. So I'm going to start off with what questions I have. If you have questions, please type them in on the comments. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube, so you can type them in over there. If you see me looking off to the left, I have a second monitor with the screens up, with both Facebook and YouTube up, and that's what I'm checking periodically to make sure I can get your questions answered. So I'll start off with the questions I had ahead of time. I only had 3, so be sure to type in whatever you want to discuss so we have more things before we finish for the day. But we'll start off with these. So one, how do I adjust a circle fill so that it doesn't sew oblong and fits within the border perfectly? I'm making patches with a faux marrow edge. So a lot of this, there's a lot of factors that play into how circular a fill is going to be. One of the things, embroidery shrinks, and that's from, pull compensation. So that push-pull effect, it's going to narrow up, making it oblong. So how do you minimize that effect? There's a few things to pay attention to. And let's draw a circle. So I'm using the complex fill tool. And then if you haven't seen the automatic circle input tool, it's fun. Left click, and as you drag, it makes a circle. If you want it to be perfectly round, hold your shift key down, and now we have a circle. Okay. Notice the stitch direction is kind of angled like this. Now, just to show you the effect that the pull, when it goes to sew, what's going to happen is in the direction it's sewing, so along that stitch direction, that's where it's going to become more oblong, if you will, more like an ellipse. And I'm going to exaggerate it greatly by just forcing the issue here so you can see. So where you've got a nice circle, when it goes to sew, it'll be perfect up here, but somewhere along here it may not match if you have things line to line. So what do you do to avoid that effect? So first off, make sure you're using appropriate materials, okay, and you're hooping well, you're stabilizing well, those sorts of things. So that's kind of first. Slowing down your machine a little bit, upping your actifeed so it's not pulling as hard. All of that can play into, minimizing its ability to shift. Okay, so that's one aspect. On the digitizing side, so if I draw this circle and let's say I have a border on it, and you said you were using the faux marrow, so instead of a single line, I'm going to convert that by holding the control key. I'm going to click on the walk, change that to decorative, and then change that to the faux marrow. It's here somewhere, probably under F, huh? Let's do, nope, not that one. I always pick the wrong one. Never fails. All right, so I got my faux marrow, and notice currently it's line to line. If I want to avoid gaps, that's not good. All right, generally what's going to happen is it's a little bit of trial and error to make sure you have a nice overlap on there. What I suggest is make it so that you're roughly halfway into your border, and that's usually safe enough if you're if all of the things are set up well. So you can use offset. So object, where is it? Oh, offset outline. That works on the complex. That doesn't work here. So on the complex, I could do object, offset outline, and pick a distance. So let's say I want to do 10-point overlap, so I can offset at 10 points. Or I can scale it by holding my shift key and my alternate key, and that'll scale it from the center. And then I can just scale it until I eyeball about halfway through there. Okay, so keep in mind it's going to shrink the most along the direction of its sewing. So if my stitch direction changes, it's going to shrink the most, along this direction and be closest up here. All right. And then your best bet is to do a test sew out, see how it goes, see if with the materials you've selected, if it's going to work out well, or if you need to adjust it a little bit more. Okay, but the direction it's going to shrink the most is in the direction you're sewing along a fill. So that's the area you want to focus on. Not necessarily up here, but along this side and this side. Okay, and if you're not sure which direction it's going to shrink, try this. Just set the pull percent to 80 And that's where it's going to pull the most. Okay, so if it's going to have a gap, that's the area it's going to be. Okay, all right, so that's what I would suggest, is aim for roughly halfway into your border as a starting point. Do a test sew out, see how it goes, and adjust a little bit if necessary. Okay, what other questions do we have? Hi, Lorena. 82 in Alaska. That's good and hot. Let's see, 82 here, so it's just like Florida. Although I bet here is a little more muggy. All right. How do we make text curve nicely around the bottom of a circle? The actual question was written a lot. It was a lot longer. It was in my text message, so I just did it this way. So when you're doing, if you haven't done arch text, let's start there. So if I do text, the line type, I can change it to arc. And okay, so I can put text above, and if I copy and paste that, just to show you a quick way to do bottom text. So I copied and pasted, you can duplicate, and then you can either rotate it twice or click these two buttons, one after another. And of course, when it's along the bottom, generally you don't want text reading upside down. You want it reading from normal. So if I go into the properties, I can change the properties to counterclockwise right here. Okay, so there we go. Now you'll notice the up here it doesn't look too bad. There's some kerning that I can adjust, but down here it's kind of spread out weird. So what's going on? And the question is, how do we adjust that? So a few things you can play with is, if you've never used auto kerning, so to get to there, double click and then go click on auto kern. So auto kern will help somewhat. All right, but you can still see the lowercase letters just kind of look a little odd. You can adjust them individually by moving them around. Okay, and if I change the color of this, you can see the X's. That's what I'm clicking on to do the moving. So if I click on that X, now it selects it. Now I can drag it and it moves it along the baseline. Okay, so I can move things around manually, but you notice all I'm doing is rearranging my problem, right? So instead of doing it like that, you can always come into the properties, and which ones haven't I messed with? Let's say between the H and the A, I can use these two buttons, which are the same manual kerning, but it allows you to shift it one way or the other. So this one will shift everything to the right. It'll move it to the left a little. So if I want to move the H closer to the T, just to exaggerate it, I can click that. All right. Now, what's going on here, what causes that is, you know, if you imagine a box around each letter, right? So down here I drew them. When you're going over the top, it looks cleaner to our eyes because that's how we're used to reading. If the bottoms of each letter gets close to each other and the top spread out, it looks natural. But when you're doing it along the bottom, it's doing that along the top, right? So the tops are getting closer together, but the bottoms are spreading out. You know, that's okay, and it's not as noticeable when you use all capital letters. When you're using lowercase, it just looks weird, right? And it's exacerbated because a lowercase letter is down, you know, halfway through here. So it looks even more unnatural because what it's doing is it's taking the box of where that full font occurs and spreading them out like this. Okay, so there's always going to be some amount of either using autokern helps, using capitals help. When all else fails, you're going to have to play with it a little bit, either using manual kerning or moving things around. But that's just, it's a problem that exists across platforms, whether you're an Illustrator or whatnot. Typeset around curves is always kind of an interesting problem, mainly because of where the baseline is. Here it's along the bottom, here it's along the top. What's natural to our eye is along the bottom. Okay, so yeah, that's that one. But basically what you're going to do is either manually drag them around or use that in your properties, use these two buttons to move them around. I'll say I prefer this way than manually moving them around, because when I'm moving them around by hand, what's that doing? It's just causing me to have to move more letters rather than doing these all together, and it adjusts them by themselves. And I don't have to worry about, oh, I move this, well now I have to move all of these. Okay. Let me quick look and see if we have any questions typed in yet. Nothing on YouTube. Nothing on Facebook. All right, so what else do we have? Oh, how to ungroup and group and show the advantage of how to use that. Hello, welcome. And how to use that for alignment within designs. All right, this is a good one. So let's look at it. All right, I'm gonna just redraw this. So let's say we want to make a stoplight. I'm just going to do circles for simplicity here. And we want 3 stoplights, let's say, evenly spaced. So again, I'm going to use the complex fill. I'm going to use the circle tool, left click, hold the shift key down, drag. Okay, so now I've got a stops. Now I can copy and paste it. And let's say I'm going to move it down here, make that one yellow, copy paste, make that one green. All right, so first off, yeah, go ahead and type in your question on the feed and we'll get it addressed. All right, so if we select all these, when you have multiple items selected up, you'll see on your toolbar, you've got these alignment. So this one vertically center, so that lines them all up. So if you didn't, when you were moving them around, if you didn't use your alternate key, that's going to keep them, that's going to line them all up in a straight row. But what if I want the spacing between all these to be even? Okay, well, if I take them, so first off, I'm going to center. Right here is to space evenly from top to bottom. So if I do that, notice it moved the center so that the space and the space are now equal. Okay, that's cool. But now, what if I want 3 stop sign, or 3 of these? So I'm going to hold my alternate key to keep it on the, so I don't have to worry about top to bottom. So I'm holding the alternate, left click and drag. Oops, helps if I copy and paste, huh? There we go, copy, paste, there. So, all right, that looks pretty even. I want it to not look even. There we go. So what if I want these spaced relatively even? My 3, then the 3, and then the 3. But I want them side to side, nice and even. Okay, so if I select everything and I distribute this way, that's cute, but that's not what I want, right? So let's undo that. Okay, I want these to behave as a group. So if I select them all, the ones that I want to stay grouped together, right here we have group. So I'm going to group those and call that group 1. I'm going to group these 3, and again, they're all selected. I'm going to click on group. It groups them as group 2. See the number 2 that it put in front of it? And then I'm going to select all these and again group them for group 3. Okay, now anytime I select any part of this, notice all 3 select and they move as a unit. Okay, so why is this useful? Well, if I select all the groups, right, so if I go group, select them all, one, I can center them evenly like this, and then that space evenly that I just tried where it took all my bubbles and moved them all over the place, I can use that, and now it's going to evenly space between the groupings rather than trying to spread all my circles out and space them around. So by using your group, you can kind of keep things together and align them. Another thing that group is really helpful for is that patch example. Do I still have it open? Gotta be here somewhere. I didn't close anything. All right, who knows where I put it. All right, so if I've got a circle and then I hold my shift key down, click on the single line center. Let's say I'm making this as just a regular satin border. All right, well, if I've got a shape with a border on it, typically you always want those to stay together. You don't want to accidentally move it like this because you want the border to still be with the shape. So by selecting both of those and again grouping them, now anytime you move one and select it, the other will move. Cool. Now what happens when you want to, let's say you don't want them grouped anymore. Okay, click your group. Right up here next to that group button, there's an ungroup button. When you click that, now they're independent entities again that you can move around as you see fit. Okay, so group and ungroup is extremely helpful for, particularly when you're using that distributed alignment between your circles and things like that. It helps a lot. All right, so let's see. So Mike, I see your question on YouTube. I had one that was a little bit earlier on Facebook, so I'll come to yours next. All right, so there was a question typed in on the feed. It says, I have a small font that I'm trying to embroidery. It's giving me false bobbin breaks. The design is roughly a 4x2 left chest logo. I changed the weight of the thread to 60, the needle 75, active feed at 4. So what machine do you have that's important to know as well? So in general, when you're getting false thread breaks, it's typically, because this isn't always the case, we'll try to get a link posted. I'm not sure if anyone at Homebase is online, but if they are, hopefully they'll get a link. If not, I'll do it afterwards on troubleshooting false thread breaks. But you have a Bravo Milko, which generation? So the new one, the MPT trimmer, the S95, the XTS, or the XT. It all depends on the trimmer. So things to look, just in general troubleshooting, regardless of machine, is you want to check your bobbin tension. If your bobbin tension's too loose, it's going to think that there's no thread in the bobbin, throwing false bobbin breaks or false thread breaks. And, that's because it's so loose and your stitches are so small, it's not sensing that there's anything there. So making sure your bobbin tension is appropriate for your machine. It does vary a little bit between the different machines. So it looks like we did get you a link for troubleshooting false thread breaks, so it's coming up in a moment. So there is that. But I would start there, looking at that. Your active feed number of 4, you could always try lowering it a little bit. 4 for for the newer machines is good. If you're dealing with super tiny things, going down to 3 or 2 would be an option, because again, the higher the number is, the looser that top thread's going to be. And particularly if you're doing tiny things, you feed a lot of thread for a tiny stitch, it thinks that it's got a thread break because it doesn't feel any tension against that thread break sensor, right? So lowering the number a little bit will make the thread a little tighter. So, but start with your bobbin tension and then look at your top thread active feed. You can lower it a little bit. Checking the design and making sure your tiny stitches aren't so tiny that it's unrealistic. You might need to add a little bit of pull compensation to the stitches. Now, given that you've already switched down to a smaller thread and smaller needle, the stitches can be smaller because you're going to a smaller hole. So that is relevant there. But bobbin tension is critical, as well as your top thread. So I would start with those 2 things and make sure it's appropriate for your particular machine. Let's see. And we did get a link there for you. So try that and let us know how that goes. On YouTube, what vector format can be used in DS for converting to an embroidery stitch? Vector format, you can use EPS, SVG, DXF. I typically end up either just opening up Illustrator, selecting all my vectors, literally Control C. I then move into DesignShop and I paste, Control V. So that's how I personally do it. I don't bother saving it out. I save my Illustrator file somewhere and move along and just copy and paste into DesignShop. But EPS is, if I go over, I'll go open one real quick. If I go open on the C drive under Designs, there's Graphics, and in here, there's this EPS. So you can open that, and then I can take that vector list and just straight up convert it. And there. That was fast. Okay, so I would probably use EPS, but like I said, most of the time I don't bother. I just save it as an AI. But I use Illustrator personally, so I'll open up the Illustrator, select what I want into DesignShop, copy, paste, and call it good. Works great for me anyway. Let's see. Any other questions that we have? Because I think that's all the pre-canned things. Yeah. So those are all the ones that I got ahead of time. So let me scroll through, make sure I didn't miss anything. Nothing on Facebook, and I don't see any others on YouTube, I don't think. Nope. Okay. So any other questions before we call it a day? I know it's holiday weekend. I hope everyone has a fantastic holiday. I'm going to Utah. I'm going to go hiking, and that's my vacation. So I'm going out to Utah and visiting some national parks. That'll be a ton of fun, if not hot, but I like hot. I live in Florida. All right. Well, I don't see anything else. So I guess we will call it a day. And I won't be back. Like I said, we're taking next week off, and I'll be back the week after that to answer any questions. So I hope you guys have a great long week, and I will talk to you in 2 weeks. So happy sewing and have some fun. Be safe.